will move on. We have another short presentation now. This is Learn to Stop Worrying and Love Having No Tech Strategy. That sounds terrifying and quite frankly at odds of everything else we've heard for the last year or two, but I'm really interested to hear it. Please welcome Mike Durrand. Hi, Mike.
Hey. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit about strategy. This is actually an embarrassingly simple and presentation. It's not, there's nothing too clever in here. So yeah, we'll crack on with it, I guess. It's all based on my own experience, so this may apply for some of you. It might chime with some of you. It may not, but you might find it interesting anyway. So you're always going to be asked for a tech strategy. We need a strategy, we want a strategy. What is your strategy? What's it this year? And so on. Now, of course, we need to create something, despite the title of my presentation. We need to create something. We need to create a strategy. But I would say exercise caution, because I think there are dangers in running away and creating a big tech strategy that's dissociated from the business strategy. And we heard a little bit of that come out in the panel discussion earlier, I think. So I'll go into that a wee bit more. I kind of annoy my CEO every year when he asks me, about strategy and what's it going to be this year. And I say something like, well, we're going to build the stuff that the business needs, and we're going to do it properly. And I guess the word properly is packing in a lot in that sentence. But ultimately, that is the strategy for me. It's, we're going to do what's necessary, and we're going to do what's necessary in the right way. Now, we'll see as we go through that maybe it's slightly more complicated than that. Some things you could do. Okay, so you could just write a strategy, right? And I've tried this. So you could go and say, you know what, I'm going to write down a strategy, some things that we're going to do across the year. Problem with that, I think, is that it's hard to square it off when you've got autonomous teams that are adapting as they go and learning and, all of that good stuff. And I've actually had feedback from the teams I work with that, we don't want a strategy. It doesn't make sense in our context because, what if things change? What's the strategy going to be for? How can we tell up front at the beginning of the year what that strategy should look like? So writing a strategy is kind of hard, right? And then maybe you could use OKRs instead of a strategy. So, again, we've tried that kind of stuff. And OKRs, yeah, what could you measure? Well, the easy things to measure are, things uptime, response time, error rate, all of those things, right? But those things, I think, are kind of hygiene factors, really, and certainly that's what we found when we did this. They were things that mostly in our business were okay. They were things that people weren't complaining about. So therefore, it didn't seem like it was a useful way to think about strategy. Yeah, they might be a thing to keep an eye on and make sure they don't drift out of, the kind of guardrails that you would set. But they certainly weren't the primary things that we were worrying about in our business. And then DORA, 4 key metrics, right? I guess you're mostly all familiar with those. We like those. They're good things. We again tried those and had a look at them. Again, they kind of felt like table stakes mostly. And I'm talking about our own experience, my own experience, but we didn't have problems with these metrics. We were kind of mostly doing okay against them. So they weren't, as a result of that, they weren't really very interesting to anyone in the business. They kind of looked at them and went, oh yeah, you're doing okay against all of these. That's kind of interesting. So again, it didn't feel like a strategic thing at all. It just felt like a kind of hygiene factor, table stake thing that we should keep an eye on, maybe. But it's not a strategy. It's not anything at that level. So this is hard, right? So at least I find it hard to write a tech strategy when someone says, go away and tell us what your tech strategy is. And this is me thinking this is hard, and this is my finance director laughing. That happens quite a lot. But yeah, it's difficult, right? It's not an easy thing to do, or at least I don't find it an easy thing to do. So at this point, I think it's worth saying that, of course, there are strategic tech things that happen, and these are some real examples that I've come across. We replaced our data warehouse. We introduced Snowflake. New tech paradigms. So serverless is something we've been looking at increasingly recently. I'll come back to replatforming, but new frameworks all the time, new tools all the time. I hope the teams are thinking about that kind of stuff. Replatforming, I've had some bad experiences with that, and by that I mean introducing a new language or replacing an existing language with a new one, and I've had bad experiences with that. But it's definitely a strategic tech thing to do. Now, what I would say about these things is, as much as possible, abstract these away from your business. Try not to talk about them in your business. And the reason I say that is, I think it's easy for these things to become a kind of toxic byword for delay or problem. And so, we're doing X, and then, someone in the marketing team or the commercial team says, oh, they're doing X. That means my stuff's not getting done. This X is bad. This X is getting in the way of everything. This X, which, by the way, is probably a very good thing, a positive thing that you're doing as a business, becomes a negative thing in the business. Even though people don't know what X is really, they just know that it's this big thing that's happening that's slowing things down. So if you can, abstract them away, kind of hide them really. And, again, we introduced a new data warehouse. We did that over a period of a few months. And we did that with, and we migrated from existing one, Redshift, to a new one, Snowflake. And we did that with no disruption to the business. And we didn't really talk to anyone in the business about that. We just kind of did it in the background. And the funny thing is, no one around our business is going to say, hey, my life's much better now because we've got Snowflake. But probably it is in some ways. Probably, the reasons that we introduced that thing, the reasons that we chose to make that change, and by the way, we were having some problems with Redshift. We were banging up against some limits and so on. Does make people's lives better, but they don't need to know that in a way. It's just, if you can do that seamlessly, in my experience, it makes things easier. And then these other things, introducing new frameworks and tools, for me, that should just be business as usual. That should be, if you've got autonomous teams, if you've got empowered teams, they should be thinking about those things. They should be bringing them to the table. They should be saying, hey, we've tried this new thing out. It's really good. How about some other teams try it out? And if that is really good, then maybe that spreads. If it isn't so good, then maybe we stop doing that. But again, that's not a concern for, in my opinion, not a concern for the wider business. This is something I came across. It's by a chap called Stefan Schmidt. That's his website at the bottom there, amazing CTO. The zigzag model, and it's really, really simple, this, right? It just says, there's a business strategy. Out of that comes the product stuff. And from that, that's what decides what you do from a tech point of view. And if you get to this last bit, this last blue box, that's, build what the business needs. And this doesn't talk so much about doing it properly, but it's build what the business needs. And I think, this is a neat way to think about it. And, your tech strategy and tech vision will differ depending on that product or on that product strategy. Because if that product strategy is really very straightforward and simple, then probably your tech vision should reflect that and be really straightforward and simple. If it's much more complex and there's a lot going on and there's difficult problems to solve in there, maybe around, scale and so on, performance, then that tech vision and tech strategy is going to have to be a little bit more complicated to reflect that. But again, it should be driven from the left to the right, I think. And then just a little talk about principles. So I find the idea of principles much more useful than strategy. So at TotallyMoney, where I work, we once a year as a team sit down and we discuss what our principles are going to be. We publish them. That's where they're published. You can go and have a look if you like. We usually settle on about 5. So we vote on them and then we settle on about 5 of them. And they talk about, how we do the work, not the work that we're going to do. Because again, the work that we're going to do is driven by the business. That's, driven by the product strategy. But this talks about how we will go about that work, the things that are important to us and how we approach our work and get stuff done. So in summary, yes, of course, we all have a tech strategy. Yes, we all need one. But I would just caution against making it more complex than it needs to be. And consider abstracting as much of that as possible away from your business. The purpose is building value for customers, right? We all know that. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, not implement a new data warehouse. That isn't the purpose. That might be a means to an end, but it isn't the purpose. The purpose is value for customers. That's the same purpose for the business strategy as it is for the product strategy, as it is for the tech strategy. And then I think, this is obvious stuff, but empower and encourage all your teams to think strategically. So have them adopting new things. Don't have them sitting waiting to be told, you can do this new thing, or you can try this out, or, maybe you want to think about this. That should be coming from the bottom up, of course. I think we all know that. We've heard much talk about that over the last 2 days, really. And yeah, reiterating tech follows product, follows business. It's just what we saw in the zigzag model. And then principles against strategy. So, for me, principles are a more useful way to think, mostly, than strategy. Of course, there are some strategic things from time to time. At this point, what I'd say is, now and again, I think I have been in situations where much more tech strategy is necessary. So you might be going through some sort of transformation with a team or introducing new practices or tools or languages or something. And so as a result of that, there might be a much more detailed and prescriptive strategy at that point. And I think that is fine. But I think a lot of the time, your strategy can be really quite straightforward. So thank you. I realise I didn't tell you who I am. I'm Mark Durrand. You'll be able to find me quite easily. My surname is unusual, so look me up in all the usual places. I work at a business called TotallyMoney. TotallyMoney is a consumer fintech business in the UK. We've got about 5.6 million customers. We talk about allowing those customers to use their data to empower themselves. And what that data means is their credit report, credit score, their open banking data. And what we do is we package that up, present it to the customers in a way that they can, that makes it actionable and understandable for them, and ultimately to help them improve their financial situation. So that's what we do. I could talk more about that. I won't. But yeah, look me up. And if you've got any questions, catch me. I'll be around for the rest of the day. That's me. Thank you.